Basic life-maintaining interdependency between plants and animals made up of feeding relationships form food webs, complex networks of feeding relationships among species that eat each other in order to live and grow. And in other words, food webs describe who eats whom among species within a particular habitat. Since food webs include all the feeding relations, also known as trophic relationships, food webs also include all the food chains in a habitat. We study food webs using models which describe networks of food chains among different species to better understand and predict what happens in nature. We illustrate these networks by using spheres to represent the species found in the food web and by using long skinny cones to represent the feeding relationships between these species. Plants are at the base of the food web at the first trophic level. Herbivores are above the plants at the second level, and carnivores of herbivores are above herbivores at the third trophic level, and so on. Omnivores eat species at more than one trophic level. In this visualization, the amount of biomass of each of the species is represented by the size of the spheres. The rate at which species eat each other is represented by the size of the cones. Notice how much the abundance and feeding rates of these interacting species change as they maintain a dynamic balance of nature that keeps all the species present from going extinct to zero biomass, and from undergoing population explosions to infinite biomass. All ecosystems in all habitats are made up of such food webs of breathing, eating, and getting eaten organisms. Now let's take a closer look at just one trophic level to better understand just how complex these relationships are. In forests, many primary consumers eat leaves, roots, and other biomass after it has died. We call these consumers decomposers because they break down dead plant biomass into nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus that the plants need to grow. These composers include leaf shredders, such as Harpaphophene millipedes and penknife mites. There's other decomposers that eat dead logs, including damp wood termites, Legidium sowbug, and Archaeostrotus earthworms. Some decomposers, such as Cepoledesmus, specialize on leaf litter from broadleaf deciduous trees. Fungi, such as chanterelles and truffles, feed on both conifer and deciduous leaf litter. Some decomposers eat dead roots, such as cranefly and click beetle. Still other decomposers, such as Pondura springtails, feed on pollen that falls from wind-pollinated plants. All this feeding by decomposers returns the nutrients stuck inside dead plant biomass back to the soil where plants can use it again to make live biomass. The most widespread of such decomposers are probably bacteria and fungi. Many of the decomposers get their energy from the bacteria and fungi growing on the dead plant matter that they consume. There's even animals that speed up the decomposition by eating poop. They are called coprophages, and they include dung beetles and scotophagid flies. Of course, dead animal biomass also gets decomposed by carcass feeders, such as Nicophorus and dermestid beetles, and phorid flies who eat insect carcasses. So hopefully you're beginning to understand how complex all this ecological interdependence is among plants and animals. It has taken ecologists many years and sophisticated computer programs to understand and keep track of this ecological complexity. Let's use one of these models to illustrate some of this understanding. One thing we've learned is that the balance of nature is dynamic. The abundances of different species change over time, from seasons to centuries and millennia. Certain species become more abundant, which decreases the abundance of their food species and increases the abundance of their consumers, such as predators. This in turn makes the certain species less abundant, which lets their food species increase and starves their predators, making them less abundant. and this starts the cycle all over again by allowing that certain species to become abundant again due to plentiful food and few predators. Such effects travel through the web to affect predators of predators and so on. So the abundance of species are not only changing due to environmental change, such as seasons and global warming. Species abundances are also changing due to other species changing. Such interdependent changes are known as high-dimensional nonlinear dynamics, or even coupled oscillators. Mathematicians have only recently made such dynamics an important research area. Combined with the study of networks, complexity studies have begun to focus more and more on the structure and nonlinear dynamics of complex networks, especially complex ecological networks such as these because of their importance and beauty. Not all people understand this, but all animals, including humans, depend on complex ecological networks, such as food webs, for their existence, not to mention happiness and evolution. You might be thinking that if scientists understand these networks well, they might be able to predict what happens when an ecosystem like a forest loses a species, perhaps due to extinction. Well, we have made such predictions, and they're even accurate. Consider the food web visualized here. What would happen if, say due to logging, the owls went extinct? How might the loss of this predator affect the dynamic balance in a little patch of forest? As this simulation shows, it might allow the omnivorous rodents to greatly increase their abundance. That in turn could decrease the abundance of some of the insects and plants that they eat. Other species that depend on those insects and plants might starve, causing them to no longer be part of that part of the forest. That's what happens in this web, as we see the sphere representing the rodents getting bigger. The spheres representing their food get smaller, and the spheres representing other consumers getting so small they disappear. Also notice that those other consumers don't always continuously get smaller. Instead they oscillate, sometimes getting smaller and sometimes getting bigger. But over time they get smaller more than they get bigger. This teaches us that an increase in abundance doesn't mean that the increase will continue. Instead, it is often only temporary, and even a species destined for extinction can increase at certain points in time. Too many people don't understand this aspect of the balance of nature, and instead think temporary increases in the abundance of endangered species is reason not to protect them. Better understanding of ecological complexity and interdependence can help people avoid these mistakes and better live with the dynamic balance of nature found in ecosystems across the planet.